By midnight, the cold had already won. She couldn't feel her hands, couldn't feel her feet. Even her breath felt thin, like it didn't belong to her anymore. There was no fire, no walls, no roof to hold anything in, just a shallow cut in the side of a frozen hill, and a sky so wide, it made her feel smaller with every passing second. Ruth Calder lay curled inside the narrow scrape she had carved into the earth that day, pulling a single wool blanket tight around her body, trying to hold in heat that was already gone. The ground beneath her was hard, the kind of cold that didn't sit on the surface, but reached up, slow, deliberate, taking whatever warmth she had left. Her teeth wouldn't stop shaking, not a gentle tremble, violent, uncontrolled, the kind that rattled her jaw until it hurt. She pressed her face into the blanket, trying to trap her own breath, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Out there, the wind moved across the prairie in long, low waves, not howling yet, not screaming, just waiting for the night to finish what it had started. She should not have been there, not alone, not without shelter, not with winter already settling into the ground. But by sunrise, she had nothing left behind her. No cabin, no land, no place to return to. Just 2 cows, a shovel, and a piece of earth no one else wanted. The cold pushed deeper, past her skin, past her muscles, into something slower, more final. Her hands stopped shaking first, then her legs, then everything. A dangerous stillness settled over her body, not peace, not rest, something else, something that felt like slipping away. She knew what it meant, even without thinking it through. If she let herself stay like this, just a little longer, she would not wake up, and the prairie would take her the same way it took everything else, quietly, without notice. For a moment, she didn't fight it. The darkness felt easier, warmer, like she could just stop. Then, a sound, soft, low, close, a breath that wasn't hers. Ruth's eyes opened, slowly. There, in the dark beside her, something shifted, warm, alive. Daisy, the cow, had moved closer in the night, drawn by instinct, by heat, by the simple need to survive the same cold. Ruth dragged herself toward it, every movement slow, heavy, as if her body no longer belonged to her. Her hand found the animal's side, thick hide, warm underneath, alive. She pressed herself against it, pulling the blanket around both of them, as tight as she could manage. The warmth didn't come fast, didn't rush in like fire. It seeped, slow, steady, patient, back into her spine, into her chest, hollow places the cold had carved out. Her breathing changed first, then her hands. Then the shaking returned, not as death, but as something fighting its way back. She pressed her forehead against the animal's flank, closing her eyes, holding on to that warmth like it was the only thing left in the world. Still here, she whispered. Still alive. The prairie did not answer. The wind kept moving. The cold did not lift. But it did not take her. By morning, the sky would still be there. The hill would still be there. And she would still be breathing. And that was enough. Because if she could survive one night, she could survive the next. And if she could survive the next, she could build something the cold could not take from her. At first light, Ruth Calder would stand, pick up her shovel, and begin carving a home, out of the only thing that had not tried to kill her. The earth itself. By sunrise, the cold had not eased. It never did. It simply waited. Ruth pushed herself upright slowly, her muscles stiff, her joints slow to answer, as if the night had taken something from her and wasn't finished with the bargain. Daisy shifted beside her, breath rising in soft clouds, alive. Ruth rested a hand on the cow's neck, just long enough to feel the warmth again, to make sure it hadn't been a dream. Then she stood. There was no time to linger, no time to feel what the night had been. Survival didn't wait for reflection. It demanded motion. She stepped out of the shallow cut in the hill, and into a world that had already hardened against her. The frost had thickened overnight, every blade of grass locked in place, every inch of ground stiff and unyielding. Behind her, nothing. No cabin, no smoke, no sign that she had ever belonged anywhere but here. Darrett would already be inside it now, stoking her fire, walking her floors, living inside a life he had taken without asking. Ruth didn't turn back. Looking back was a kind of weakness she could not afford. Instead, she walked the face of the hill, studying it. The soil here was wrong for crops, too dense, too heavy. But that was why no one had claimed it, and that was why it was still hers. She drove the shovel into the earth again. The first strike jarred her arms, sent a dull shock up through her shoulders. The ground resisted, hard, unforgiving. She struck again, and again, until a piece broke free. Not loose soil, a solid chunk, holding its shape, heavy in her hand. Ruth turned it over slowly, feeling the weight of it, the way it did not crumble. The hill remembered itself, and for the first time, she understood what that meant. She wasn't going to build a house. She was going to carve one. The work began that morning, and did not stop. Hour after hour, the same motion. Drive, lift, turn, throw. No wasted movement, no thought beyond the next cut. The sun climbed, then fell again, dragging weak light across the prairie, and still she worked. Her hands broke open before midday, blisters tearing, skin splitting along the handle of the shovel. Each grip after that was a negotiation with pain. But pain didn't stop the work. Cold didn't stop the work. Nothing did. By afternoon, the shallow scrape had deepened. 2 feet, then 3. The earth changed as she went. Cooler, slightly damp, easier to shape. It came away in thick pieces, stacking beside her like crude bricks waiting to be used. She didn't notice the rider at first. Just a shadow at the top of the ridge, still watching. Then another, and another. Word had traveled. A woman alone, digging into the side of a hill, with no roof, no walls, and winter already closing in. They didn't need to speak. Their silence said enough. Mad. Desperate. Already lost. Ruth kept digging. She did not look up, did not answer the judgment that hung in the air above her. Because they were right. About one thing. If this failed, she would not survive the winter. There would be no second chance. By evening, her arms trembled with every lift. Her back burned, a deep, steady ache that refused to fade. But the hole was no longer just a hole. It had shape now, depth, a beginning of something that could hold her. She climbed down into it, lowered herself carefully, and sat with her back against the earth. The wind still moved above her, but down here it softened. Not gone, not yet, but weaker. Ruth closed her eyes, just for a moment, feeling the difference. That was enough. She opened them again, reached for the shovel, and went back to work. Because night was coming again. And this time, she intended to meet it, from inside the earth. By the second week, the hill had begun to take shape around her. Not as a shelter anyone would recognize, but as something quieter, something that held. Ruth could stand now, just barely, in the center of the space she had carved. The walls rose close on either side, thick, solid, unmoving. And above her, a ceiling of packed earth, held in place by nothing but its own weight and her stubborn refusal to stop digging. She had left a pillar in the middle. Not by design at first, but by instinct. A column of untouched ground, supporting everything above it. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't measured, but it held, and that was enough. Her days had become a pattern, 2 hours digging, 1 hour hauling. Again, and again, and again. She carved deeper into the hill, then dragged the earth out behind her using a crude sling made from hide. Each load heavy enough to pull at her shoulders, to bend her forward until her spine felt like it might split. Still, she moved it, because every foot she gained was one more foot the cold would have to cross to reach her. And the cold was coming faster now, the morning sharpened first. Frost no longer melted by midday. The ground stayed hard, even under full sun. Then the nights deepened. The kind of cold that crept into the bones of things, and stayed there, out on the prairie. Other homesteads began preparing. Stacking wood, sealing doors, closing in against what they knew was coming. Up on the ridge, the riders came more often now. They sat their horses in silence, watching her disappear into the dark mouth of the hill, then reappear, dragging earth behind her. Hill witch. Ground digger, grave builder. She heard the names when she went to the creek. Heard them again in the distance when she passed near town. Not shouted, not thrown like insults, spoken low, as if saying them too loudly might make them true. Ruth carried them with her, the same way she carried the dirt, without answering, without stopping, because there was another weight now, one heavier than all the rest. Time. Silas had told her, 6 months, 6 months to prove she belonged on this land, or it would be taken from her, the same way everything else had been. The thought sat behind every movement, every shovel cut, every step up the ramp. If she failed, this hole would not be a home, it would be evidence of a life that almost was, and wasn't allowed to be. So she worked longer. Into the fading light, into the cold edge of evening, until the shovel grew too heavy to lift and her hands could no longer close around it. That was when she would stop.
Not because the work was done, but because her body refused to give more. And even then, rest was not safe. One night, as she lay wrapped in her blanket near the entrance, she heard them. Hooves, fast, unsteady. Voices carried on the wind, loud, reckless, laughing at something that wasn't funny. 3 riders, young, drunk, looking for something to break. A stone struck the earth above her head, hard enough to send dust falling from the unfinished roof. Evening, Hill Witch, a voice called out, mocking, careless. Another stone, closer this time. Daisy shifted, pulling against her rope, fear moving through her body in sharp, sudden jerks. Ruth didn't move. One hand held the rope tight. The other closed slowly around the handle of her axe. Not to fight, to stay ready. Because out here, 3 men on horseback, and 1 woman on the ground, was not a contest. It was a decision, and survival meant choosing the only answer that worked. Stillness, silence, endurance. They circled once, twice, laughing, throwing stones at something that did not answer back. Then they rode off, their voices fading into the empty distance. The hill grew quiet again. Ruth waited, long after the sound was gone. Only when she was sure did she release the axe. Her hand trembled now, not from cold, from what had almost happened, and what might come again. Morning came hard and gray. She stepped outside, found the stones scattered around the entrance, picked them up, one by one, carried them inside, set them along the base of the wall, fitting them into the earth where they held firm. Nothing wasted, not even what had been thrown at her. She stepped back, looked at the growing shape of the place, the walls, the floor, the depth she had carved from nothing. It wasn't just a hole anymore. It was becoming something else, something that could resist, something that could hold. She picked up the shovel again, because the wind had shifted overnight, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the first real storm was already on its way.
The storm didn't build. It arrived. One moment, the sky was only gray. The next, it turned hard, metallic, like something had sealed it shut. The temperature dropped so fast, it felt like the air had been pulled out and replaced with something colder. Then the wind came. Not a warning, not a rise, a force. It hit the hill and kept hitting it, again and again, as if it meant to tear it open. Snow didn't fall. It drove, sideways, sharp enough to sting exposed skin raw. Ruth was on the roof when it began, one section still open, a gap in the covering she hadn't finished, an opening the storm found immediately. She didn't hesitate. She dropped to the ground, ran to the cows, hands closing around the ropes. Move. Daisy followed, frightened, but moving. Buttercup didn't. The older cow struggled to rise, legs unsteady, breath rattling deep in her chest. The sickness had been there for days, quiet, waiting. Now the cold struck it like a hammer. Ruth pulled harder. Come on. But the animal barely moved. The wind pushed against them, forcing air from her lungs, driving snow into her eyes until she could barely see. There was no time. She got Daisy inside first, down the ramp, into the half-finished shelter, into what little stillness existed. Then she turned back. Buttercup was down now, lying in the open, snow already gathering along her side. Ruth knelt beside her, hands pressing into the thick hide, trying to force life back into a body that was already losing the fight. Up. The word barely carried, lost in the wind. The cow didn't answer, didn't move. Ruth stayed there a moment longer, just long enough to understand what she was choosing. Then she stood, turned, and went back into the hill. Inside, the storm was quieter, not gone, never gone, but weakened, filtered. Snow still blew through the open roof, falling in clean white drifts onto the dirt floor. The cold followed it. Ruth moved without stopping. She dragged what covering she had into place, hung a hide across the entrance, blocking what wind she could. Then she climbed, back up into the storm, again and again, each time carrying sod, heavy frozen blocks cut from the ground with her axe, each time forcing them into place over the gap above her head. The wind fought her for every step, tried to turn her sideways, to knock her down, to make her let go. She didn't, because if she did, the storm would enter. There would be no stopping it. Hours passed, then more. Day turned to something darker, then to night, without any real change in the sky. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only work, and the slow closing of the roof.
Inside, Daisy shifted restlessly, her breath thick in the cold air. Outside, the storm did not weaken. It pressed harder, demanding more than she had left to give. Sometime near dawn, the last gap closed, the final block of sod forced into place, sealing the hill shut. Ruth slid down the ramp, stumbled into the darkness, and let the hide fall over the entrance behind her. Silence followed, not complete, but enough. The wind was still there, but it no longer reached her. She turned, eyes adjusting slowly to the dim light of her single tallow lamp, and saw the shape on the ground. Buttercup. She must have crawled, or been dragged by the storm, just far enough to reach the entrance. But not far enough. Ruth stepped closer, kneeled beside the body, placed her hand against the flank. Cold, still, the storm had taken her. For a moment, everything inside Ruth stopped. No movement, no thought, just the weight of it. Then the world returned, because it always did, no matter what was lost. She pressed her forehead briefly against the animal's neck, eyes closed. Then she stood. The knife in her hand felt heavier than it should. But there was no question, no hesitation. Out here, nothing could be wasted, not even loss. She set the lamp closer, took a breath, and began the work. Each cut slow, deliberate, not driven by grief, but by survival. Outside, 4 feet of snow buried the prairie. Inside, the air held, not warm, but not killing, steady, unchanging. Ruth paused once, just long enough to press her hand against the wall of the hill. The earth was cool, but alive with something else. Holding. For the first time, she felt it clearly. The hill was keeping her alive. And this time, the storm had not won. The storm passed, the way it always did. Not with relief, not with mercy. Just by leaving. One morning, the wind was gone. The sky opened again, wide, empty, as if nothing had happened at all. But the land remembered. 4 feet of snow, hard-packed by days of wind, locked the prairie in place. Fences buried, tracks erased, whole stretches of ground unrecognizable. Ruth stepped out of the dugout slowly, one hand against the frame, eyes narrowing against the light. The cold was still there, sharp, unforgiving, but it no longer felt like something that could take her. Behind her, the hill stood as it had before, unchanged, unmoved, holding everything she needed inside it. She walked the edge of the drift, boots sinking deep, each step an effort. Daisy followed behind her, slow, but steady. Alive. Not far from the ridge, she saw the first sign. A collapsed roof, half buried, the structure sagging inward under the weight of snow and wind. No smoke, no movement. Ruth didn't stop. She kept walking, because she already knew what she would find, and what she could not change. By the time she reached town, the truth had settled in. Woodpiles gone, doors sealed from the inside, not to keep the cold out, but to hold what little warmth remained. Men moved slower, voices quieter, eyes hollowed by nights that had taken more than sleep. Some had made it, some had not. No one said it out loud,
They didn't need to. Ruth stood at the edge of it, watching, not as part of the town anymore, but as something separate. Someone who had stepped outside the way they all understood survival. Silas saw her first. He stepped out from the mercantile, coat pulled tight, eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the sight of her. Alive. Unharmed. How? The words slipped out before he could stop it. Ruth didn't answer right away. She just reached into the sack at her side and set something down on the wooden step. Wrapped meat. Clean. Carefully cut. Enough to matter. Silas stared at it, then back at her. Understanding came slowly. Not just that she had survived, but how. You didn't fight it, he said quietly. Ruth shook her head once. No. I stopped letting it reach me. The words settled between them. Simple, and heavier than anything else that had passed through that town all winter. By spring, the snow began to break. Slowly at first, then all at once. Turning hard ground into something soft again, water ran through the low places, cutting new lines into the land. And everywhere, people started over. But not the same way. Not anymore. Along the edge of the basin, new shapes appeared. Not cabins first, not walls. Cuts in the earth, entrances lowered into hillsides. Ground piled high against what little stood above it. People digging, not out of desperation, but out of something closer to understanding. Ruth watched it from a distance. From the mouth of her dugout, one hand resting lightly against the packed wall beside her. The same wall that had held through the storm. The same earth that had given her back her life, inch by inch. Daisy grazed nearby, thin now, but recovering. Alive. Everything that remained mattered more. Ruth stepped back inside, letting the light fall behind her, the temperature change, subtle, but immediate. The air held, quiet, still. She crossed the small space, sat down near the wall, and pressed her palm flat against the earth. Not cold, not warm, steady, reliable, enough. Outside, the wind moved again across the prairie, unchanged, relentless, still searching for something to take. Inside, it found nothing, because this time, there was nowhere left for it to enter.